I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things, a-creepin' and crawlin'. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussin' and fightin', and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes!
Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus. Good evening, Bowling Green, and hello to those of you listening on the internet and on Pacifica stations, wherever and whenever you may be. My name is Joe DeMare, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood.
And together, she and I are going to create a wonderful hour of radio called For a Green Future. For a Green Future is a show where we talk about ecology and the environment, and we talk about it in the way that it affects you. Your wealth, your health, your happiness, the health and happiness of your friends and families and co-workers and the bees and the water fleas and the puppies and the kitties and pretty much everybody else and everything else, because like it or not, we are all wrapped up together on this wonderful, tiny little planet called Earth. We have a typical, wonderful show for you today. We're just going to chat for the next 10 minutes or so, and then we'll have an interview with Emily Goddard, who is with the Yale Program on Climate Communications. Every year, they do a survey of Americans to find out what their beliefs and attitudes are in regards to global warming. Emily is going to share with us the results of this year's survey, so stick around.
Indeed.
After that, we'll hear from our wonderful patrons, without whom this show would not be possible, and then it'll be Rebecca's turn at the mic. Rebecca, what will you be talking to us about this week?
I will be talking about Star of Jerusalem.
Ah, interesting. Looking forward to that. This is the pre-recorded show, so you won't be able to call in with questions, but we do welcome listener feedback. Text your comments and suggestions at any time to 419-973-5841. You can also send an email to joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org. We will read your comments on the air during next week's show. So summer is not yet here. The official start of summer, that is, the summer solstice, is still 3 weeks away, June 21st. Of course, that's the astrological summer, which is based on solstice and equinoxes. Turns out there's also something called the meteorological summer, which starts on June 1st, just a few days away. That summer uses 3-month sections for each season. So for meteorologists, summer just goes June, July, August. Of course, as global warming continues to change our weather, summer seems to be extending quite a bit in either direction.
Yep.
Yeah, the hot weather is definitely already here. Highs of in the 80s this week, and if the past few years are any indication, we could be turning on the air conditioning through the month of October. One season that's definitely well underway is the gardening season. Gardening is often one of the main ways that people interact with nature in our society. Getting out into the garden, getting dirt under your fingernails has all kinds of health benefits, and not just from eating healthy, fresh produce. Studies have shown that getting exposed to healthy garden dirt can help strengthen your immune system.
My roommate just has a little herb garden going on. I think maybe like 1 or 2 tomato plants too, but mostly herbs.
And Do you feel healthier because of that?
Not yet.
Folks, one task that you have to do if you want a successful garden is weeding, of course. The time-honored way to do that is to simply go out and pull up the weeds by hand. Mulching is also an effective way to keep weeds down, but every year we're struck by the fact that much of what we're pulling up as weeds is actually more nutritious than the plants we're growing in the garden. One of the best examples of this is lamb's quarters, which is a wild plant related to spinach. It's more nutritious than spinach, and many think it has lamb's quarter has a better flavor than spinach. Another weed worth talking about is our violets. This was a really good year for violets in our yard. Earlier in the spring, our yard was covered with thousands of flowers. We actually held off on mowing that section because it looked so pretty.
You know what? I remembered why the Ohio white violet, one of them is called buffalo violet, is because I remember when I was reading I was reading the Little House books as a kid. There was a thing called a buffalo wallow where like the buffaloes would, get their coats all dusty.
Oh, yeah.
Insecticide out. Yeah, and after they left, violets would grow up in them. So, and I remember there's like a conversation between Laura and Pa where she's saying, like, "Oh, looks like fairies live here," and I was like, "No, big ugly buffalo."
Oh, unbelievable.
They're just teddy bears with giant horns.
I feel like violets are part of the American consciousness in a way that surpasses just normal yard maintenance. Yeah. The leaves of the violet plant are actually highly nutritious, and they don't get bitter as they grow older the way other wild plants like dandelions do.
Okay.
So you can actually eat violets if you want to. Maybe the buffalo, that's what they were doing.
Could then.
Most wild plants, if you go foraging, you want to catch while the leaves are young, but you can harvest violet leaves all summer long. They're rich in vitamins A and C, and they can be cooked like spinach when they're older. You could also make herbal teas out of the leaves and flowers if you wish. These reminders of these edible wild plants remind us that nature is actually not that terrible force that we have to overcome and conquer so that we can have our gardens. Nature's quite capable of supplying us with what we need to survive all on its own. Indigenous cultures often have had a mix of cultivated plants and foraging. They might use fire to clear areas to make them habitable for plants like blueberries, but then they let the blueberries stay wild growing. European culture is based on taking wild things like blueberries and then domesticating them in order to create the best possible berry. Of course, if we start selecting for traits like size, we often lose the best part of the berry. Wild strawberries and wild blueberries taste much better than our gigantic domesticated versions. Usually the wild plants are a little smaller and you have to work harder to get them, but they're also often packed with more nutrition.
I remember that, one of my favorite morbid YouTube channel people has made a comment that for some reason people always disappear. A lot of people have disappeared and been presumed stolen by UFOs on their way to pick blackberries.
Blackberries specifically?
Yeah. There's something about blackberries. The aliens love them. And they must be like fuel, like one berry can take them galaxies away.
Yeah, maybe.
That's it. That's totally it.
I suppose maybe because they grow in such wild, isolated conditions.
That could be, easy to get lost.
Easier to abduct.
Yeah.
Well, listeners, how are your gardens growing? What sort of things are you planting? Do you have trouble weeding the way we do? Our garden plan this year is only going to be about a quarter of the size of the gardens that we've attempted in the past. We've just had too much sympathy for the weeds. We never cleared them out. And of course, if you let the weeds get going, they'll mercilessly wipe out the tomatoes and beets and radishes that you're trying to grow. And of course, there's some weeds that you really do not want to mess with. Giant hogweed comes to mind. That's the plant in the Herculeum mantigazianum, of course.
Beg your pardon?
APACI, well, the thing we checked, is the carrot family known as umbellifers. So they were previously, they have been.
Oh, like Queen Anne's lace.
Yes.
Yeah, but I don't know. I associate the word umbel with an umbel is some kind of a physical part of a flower, and I associate that with sort of the belled shape of the Queen Anne's lace, but except for they're inverse, they're concave.
Yeah.
So, but like in the heat of the day, they can look sort of like bells, the bell shape. Yeah.
Well, Queen Anne's lace is relatively safe compared to the giant hogweed. Once you get sap from the giant hogweed on your skin, it can cause a terrible rash that's activated by sunlight and can last up to 7 years.
So, whoa. Rash that lasts for 7 years?
Yes.
That's...
It's dormant until you get out in the sun, and then it's comes up to the surface of your skin.
This is alarming on the level with realizing that T-Rexes are still alive. It sounds like.
Oh. Well, it's an invasive species from Russia, of course.
Yeah.
In North America, we have our own homegrown poison ivy plant. But
Yes.
those rashes do not last for years and years. Are a lot like gardens. Different ideas and feelings kind of grow in the soil of our consciousness. There's a lot of good plants we would like to cultivate, personality traits like loyalty, kindness, and an appreciation and love for the natural world would not be.
Not only that, but I spit a lot of garbage on mine,
And yet still the weeds keep growing. Like a garden, untruths and disinformation can keep growing through your mind. One of the best, most public examples of that we reported on last week is the disinformation surrounding renewable energy. When President Trump stands up at an event like one of his rallies or in front of the UN or at places like Davos, he often spends much of his speech spouting things that simply are not true. What he's trying to do, and what he usually succeeds in doing, is planting the seeds of the obnoxious weeds in the minds of his believers, his audience. Trump has said many times that wind power and wind turbines are not at all practical. He's even made the claim that every time a utility-scale wind turbine spins, it loses $1,000. This is patently ridiculous. If it were true, no one would be installing wind turbines anywhere in the world.
Not a tenant, yeah.
Instead, it's one of the fastest growing energy sources on the planet. So why does he tell such an obviously and easily disproved lie? The answer is quite insidious.
Mm-hmm.
If you're someone who believes that lie, in order to maintain that belief, you have to fill the garden of your mind with hundreds of other weeds that will crowd out the truth completely. Here's how it works. If you accept Trump's statement that wind turbines lose money as truth, then you have to ask, why are we still building so many wind turbines? If they lose money with every revolution, how can anyone afford to build them? So the answer that you're given is that the whole thing is a scam, fueled solely by government subsidies. Of course, that's false too.
That's actually nuclear, I'm fairly sure.
Yes, very much so. By billions of dollars in most cases. Trump has eliminated the subsidies for wind and other renewables, but wind farms are still going up because they are, in fact, one of the most profitable forms of energy. But forget about the truth for a little while. We're still trying to dive into the mind of the people that Trump has misled. So you have money-losing turbines that are nothing more than a way to steal people's tax dollars. The fact that the turbines continue to be built and continue to operate must then mean that the government is full of crooks who are using the wind as a scam to enrich themselves and their partners in crime by putting up these turbines. So now you've made the leap from believing that wind turbines are uneconomical to believing that the government is being run by cheats and crooks. Once you start believing that, it's easy to find more and more evidence of it. Of course, your cynicism and paranoia can be fed by the actual scams and corruption as they're discovered. In Ohio, we had our famous House Bill 6 scandal, which really was a case of conspiracy between government and corporate officials to steal the money from ratepayers. But wind is exactly the opposite of the real scandal that happened with the nuclear power plants, like we were just discussing. The price of generating energy with wind turbines gets cheaper as the turbines get bigger because the amount of energy in the wind is the square of the area of the blades.
I feel like we should have like a 800 number if you're considering, like, have you been caught blatantly ripping off the taxpayers and you're feeling like life has no meaning? Call 1-800.
That would be a good public service.
Yeah.
Too bad we don't have any public services anymore.
Good point.
A wind turbine being twice the diameter means it outputs 4 times the power. 5 times the diameter would equal 25 times as much power. This basic physics explains why today's 15 megawatt turbines are being built at a breakneck pace around the world. But if you had allowed the initial weed of Trump's lie to start growing in your mind, now you have to have a global conspiracy, probably being run by some malevolent foreign power like China, in order to explain the continued growth of wind turbines. Throwing religion into the mix is like adding fertilizer to a garden where weeds have already choked out all the garden plants. Religion is by definition irrational.
Well, I mean, it's about things you can't prove one way or t'other.
It can still be a valuable, beautiful thing, but it's based on ideas and beliefs which cannot be rationally defended. If they could, it wouldn't be a religion. It wouldn't be a matter of faith. It would just be philosophy. We had a conversation this week with someone who claimed that because they were Catholic, they believed humans could not destroy the Earth's ecosystems.
Yeah, they said that about the passenger pigeon. Remember the passenger pigeon?
There were so many.
And and they were writing they were writing newspaper articles like as they were running out, saying we're running out of passenger pigeons. We have to stop killing them all. And people said it was sacrilegious because you were implying that man could change God's creation.
Yes.
Same ever-loving thing.
God would not allow that to happen. Surely. Right. We have no free will. Of course, the last 2 popes very firmly believed otherwise. The popes have written extensively about the threats our unsustainable lifestyles pose to God's creations. They understand we're perfectly capable of making the earth uninhabitable and that God will not step miraculously in to stop us if we stay on this course. But this gentleman we were talking to had done the necessary mental gymnastics to justify continuing to believe the lies that President Trump is telling. Any attempt to point out that Trump is a blatant liar and is pursuing his own corrupt policies that are literally robbing not only the federal government, but the taxpayers of billions of dollars for his own personal gain, that is just met simply with the idea that the other side does it too. What this allows people who have fallen into the weeds of untruth to do is convince themselves that the real truth is unknowable, so they might as well keep believing the lies that they prefer. But of course, there is such a thing as objective truth, especially when it comes to facts and figures like we have, especially with wind power. Physics can explain to us why huge utility-scale wind turbines actually can and do generate electricity at a profit. But to a person whose entire mental energy is dedicated to trying to maintain falsehoods, things like the physics don't really matter. Luckily, most people do tend towards the truth. The basic idea behind democracy is that all of us put together make better decisions than any one of us, or any small group of us. We see this truth playing out over and over again in countries with healthy democracies. Their laws help the people and protect the planet. Now, if you live in the United States, you might be forgiven for believing that most people don't accept the truth of basic ecological principles like global warming. That's certainly the impression you get from watching the mainstream media. And also on social media, the anti-science global warming deniers are the loudest, most obnoxious voices. But the truth is, most people actually do believe in the reality of the climate changing. My next guest, Emily Goddard, helps every year with a nationwide survey of the attitudes of U.S. citizens about global warming. I think you'll find the results of this year's survey encouraging. Let's go to that interview now.
Hello and welcome to For a Green Future. Could you just please share with us your name and who you're with?
Absolutely. My name is Emily Goddard, and I am a data analyst with the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication.
All right. And one of your program's main activities is you do a survey every year about people's attitudes towards global warming. How did you do this survey? I mean, who did you choose? How did you decide how many people to pick? And just give us the basics of what you did.
Oh, sure. So we actually use an external survey company. We use Ipsos, and they have a knowledge panel, which is a nationally representative panel of people in the United States. And we've used them. We've done the survey twice a year, every year for, I think since, I don't want to get it wrong, for many years now, over a decade.
In the report, the earliest ones you have are from 2008.
Yes. And there were a couple of years in the beginning where I don't think we did it every single year, but we have done it pretty much every single year since then. And so they have a process where they select people. It's all random, which gives us the nationally representative sample. So we can make broader claims about the general population, even though obviously we haven't surveyed everyone in the United States. Because we have representative weights, we're able to make representative claims.
All right, cool. And so what sorts of things did you see in this year's survey?
Yeah. So a lot of really interesting findings. It's interesting. We're actually working through the spring survey right now, but from the fall survey, we see a lot of people are really in favor of renewable energy policies. We see most people, 57% of Americans would prefer to vote for a candidate who supports action on global warming.
That's interesting. Well, and I think the basic thing that you guys find every year is that most Americans believe in global warming, right?
Absolutely, yes. Every single year we find that most people think that global warming is happening, and most people, 58%, think that it is human caused. So really, overall, and we see this in my work where we downscale the data to specific states and counties. We see it across the country. In individual states and counties, and also nationally, that most people, 72%, I think, in the most recent survey, think that global warming is happening, and really understand the science.
Yeah, that's encouraging.
Yes.
And one interesting little thing I saw was that if you ask the people who at first say they don't know what their best guess is, the majority of them go with global warming, and that kind of brings the total up to like 81%.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting that these numbers haven't actually shifted that much since 2008, right? I'm looking back at there's a little bit of fluctuation up and down, but it's within a few percentage points.
Yeah, we see, for most of these, we see a gradual upward trend. We've been seeing a gradual upward trend. And like you said, it's not huge. And there have been some dips and some peaks. But across most of our questions, we're seeing either beliefs stay the same or pro-climate beliefs increase slightly.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's encouraging also.
Yeah. Yeah, we can see like with Americans who are very sure that global warming is happening, we've seen a slight increase since 2008.
Okay. And I found that interesting that that was true no matter who was sort of leading the country. And it's still true with this latest survey, even though we've had a year of climate denial as the official U.S. government policy.
Yeah, I think that's something that's really important and that we try to highlight in these surveys is that the policy that we're seeing in the government right now and even in the past hasn't always reflected the views of people. So we have these nationally representative surveys, which is giving us a pretty good guess about what people all over the country are saying. And you can see, I think in total we have over 30,000 respondents at this point. So that's across all years, but still that's a pretty good number of people that we've surveyed at this point. And we see across all our waves of data, most people do think that global warming is happening. A lot of people are holding these pro-climate views, and it isn't necessarily reflected in the government's policies.
And maybe one of the reasons for that is it also turns out that even though most people believe in global warming, according to your survey, most people don't believe most people believe in global warming.
Yes, that's a huge, a huge issue that we have is that there's a lot of like cognitive dissonance among people, where they really don't understand that most people hold their views. And we also see, I'm trying to pull up the exact number right now, but we see that most people don't discuss global warming with their family and friends. Mm-hmm. And most people aren't hearing about it in the media. So even though most people hold these pro-climate views, people aren't talking about it. People aren't receiving that information from the media that they consume. So it's kind of like everyone has these views in secret almost.
Yeah, that is kind of bizarre, but so, people should realize that the people they think probably don't believe in global warming, they probably do.
Yes. Yeah. And we want to encourage, that's part of what we do is the Yale Program on Climate Change Communication. We want to encourage communication. That can be communication on a broader level with the news, with media, with, our partners that we work with. But it can also be just between people, between your neighbors, between your friends, family, just talking with them about climate change and about, the changes that you want to see in the world.
One number that I found a little distressing was how many people say that it's important to them. That number was a little lower than I expected that to be.
Yeah, I think we recently put out a climate note about this, actually. People's, I think it was voting preferences, but what they're really thinking about and their top worries. And yeah, we see that global warming is on the list, but it's kind of far down. So it is definitely, I think that could potentially be because people aren't talking about it, because it's not front of mind. Although I don't know, there are plenty of reasons why that could be. But yeah, it's not necessarily high on people's priority lists.
Mm-hmm. One thing that actually has had a very clear trend over the years that you've been doing this study is people who answer yes to the question, have you personally been affected by global warming?
Yes. Yes, that has definitely been increasing, although we still do see that it's around 50%, although a little bit less, of people who say that they've been personally affected by global warming. And I think that gets to what you were saying before about people who think that it's personally important to them. We still see when we ask people who they think global warming is going to harm most, an increasing number of people say them personally. and people and their family and people in their communities. But most people we're seeing higher numbers when it's like people in developing countries, future generations of people. There's this idea that global warming is a like over there and in the future issue, as opposed to a here and now issue. But of course, we're seeing increasing numbers of extreme weather events. We're seeing the impacts of climate change right now. And I think that there's still a little bit of disconnect between people understanding what they're seeing in their real lives and understanding that that is climate change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of easy to do the over there mentality, especially right here in Northwest Ohio. We, according to some studies, we're like the least susceptible to global warming effects in North America. But actually, some people are starting to move up here because of that.
Yeah.
Have people considered moving because of global warming effects?
Yeah, we see not many at the moment, but I think we have about 12% of people say that yes, they have considered moving to avoid the impacts of global warming. So not a huge percentage, but definitely not nothing. But I think the majority of people are still staying put.
Well, I suppose as that have you been affected graph keeps going up, then maybe that I'm thinking about moving graph will start to follow it.
Possibly, yeah. We'll have to see what the data says.
So, is there anything that you would like to add to this? Anything you'd like to see people? What would you like to see people take away from your survey?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of it is what we were talking about in the beginning, just understanding that most people think that global warming is happening. Most people understand that it is human caused. Most people understand that scientists agree that global warming is happening. And I think that uniting around that and understanding that your neighbors and the people around you, and even the people not around you, even the people who live across the country, there's a lot of misinformation and just misrepresentation of public opinion of these issues, of public opinion about global warming in the news and in the mainstream culture. And so understanding that many people are really on the same page about this, and many people really want to see these pro-climate changes. I think is really important, and just encouraging people to talk to their neighbors about it, talk to their friends and family about climate change, and understand that most of us actually want to see these changes happen.
Mm-hmm. All right, yeah, and I think this is one of the things we try to do with our show, For a Green Future, is to let people know it's okay that you believe in global warming. It's not something you have to hide. You can be proud and out front about it, and yes. I think that and this mirrors my personal experience. When I bought a plug-in hybrid car, when I put solar panels on my roof, your neighbors actually aren't going to mock you for it. Your neighbors actually are going to be happy that you've done that. Yes,
this is something that our sister organization, the Yale Climate Connections, talks about a lot. I can send you the article after this interview if you're interested. But they found that it's not that your neighbors are going to mock you. They might actually copy you. Seeing someone else who got solar panels or got a plug-in hybrid car or something like that, they might say like, oh, wow, I wanted to do that, but I didn't think it was possible, or I didn't think that I was worried that I would be mocked. And it's actually the opposite. It's actually more people are interested than you think.
Well, that was our interview with Emily Goddard. What did you think? Drop us a line at joe@joedemareforgreenfuture.org or send us a text at 419-973-5841. Were you surprised to learn that most of your friends, neighbors, and family probably feel the same way you do? That is, they probably also believe global warming is real and that we should do something about it. It's a fantastic success of public relations that even though the vast majority of us feel that way, we don't believe other people do. It's just another sign of the media and the men above trying to keep down the truth. But right now, I feel great because it's that wonderful time of the show where we get to thank our patrons. Our patrons are fantastic, intelligible, vitally interesting people
Spoken to most of personally, but
who have had the community spirit and sufficient qualities to want to help support For a Green Future. They went to patreon.com, that's Patreon. There they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our Patreon page. They scrolled through looking at the interesting pictures and chose a membership level that matched their budget. We did get a comment this week from someone who said that the dog lovers level should come after the cat lovers level on the Patreon page. That person was obviously a cat lover, but what do you think? Should dogs
we could do like the border battle, with the Ohio State, Michigan thing. Make people call in and support dogs or cats. And the ones that get the most votes wins.
Yeah, that's drawing a bigger line than I shouldn't say that.
Maybe. Just a little.
Leave us a comment if you sign up to be a patron.
Yeah.
So now every month a little bit comes out of their account and goes over to ours, and that's how we can afford to keep this show on the air. Thank you to our patrons. All right, next up, it's time for Rebecca to take the mic. Rebecca, what will we be talking about this week?
Okay, well, I'm going to be talking about a plant called Star of Jerusalem. This week, a memory came up from on Facebook for a few years ago when we lived in another neighborhood, and I just had taken a picture of these white flowers. They were like all the way down in the cut grass, and it was cut pretty short. So
yes,
which apparently is not usually how these flowers grow, which is interesting. But yeah, so it came back up a couple days ago, and a friend of mine commented that it was Star of Jerusalem. So I thought I would give it a try here. Star of Jerusalem is called a bunch of different things. A lot of them have to do with time because it blossoms late in the day for some reason.
Is this the tiny little white flower?
Yeah, white flowers, green vein, vein-like stripes on the outside.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't remember the green-like stripes.
Well, they're not really tiny. I don't know.
Okay. Well,
Smallish. Right. But yeah, they are a spring-blooming herbaceous bulbous perennial. See, herbaceous doesn't have a hard stem, doesn't grow a hard woody stem. Bulbous, it grows from bulbs. And perennial, you plant one, it'll last you a while.
Right.
It comes back every year. So yeah, they are six-petaled white flowers, or they have six-petaled white flowers, which have a green stripe on the outside. They're toxic to human pets and wildlife, so they're not good, it turns out. They're in the asparagus family, oddly enough. And they're native to southern and central Europe and northwest Africa, which is where they should belong because they are considered to be an invasive weed in some parts of North America, which, of course, I was looking at this and I saw grows in dense mats, and I was like, okay, they have that going. They grow in dense mats. Also, they run off a lot of animals, which will then go graze on native animals because they're poison, and the deer don't like the taste, or the bunnies. So, yeah, so they don't have, they also spread by seed, so it's seed and the bulbs dividing underground. They don't have what you call them, underground stems or rhizomes or anything.
Okay, so it's a bulb, but it spreads by seed, but it forms into a bulb wherever it wants to grow.
Yeah. Well, the bulbs are, underground, like they're orchids, whatever, yeah. Yeah, and so it also is not, to my knowledge, allelopathic, is it? Allelopathic thing where it puts out chemicals that poison other plants.
It's toxic to animals, but not plants.
Yeah.
So 50% is a bit.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's doing the best it can. So, yeah, I mean, it manages to be pretty dadgum invasive, given those limitations, though. Yeah, it dies back, apparently. After it flowers, it dies back into the bulb and then regrows from it the next year. And there are hermaphroditic flowers. Each one has both male and female organs. And let's see. Yeah, it was first described by writers in the 1st century, so a while ago. There's multiple writers, apparently.
Do you know how it got over to North America? Some ship.
I don't, but I'm guessing like settlers brought it over. But why would you do that? Because I don't know, unless it has some kind of, most of the stuff they brought over had some kind of benefit to people, like either medication or getting rid of bad husbands in the one case.
Well, people planted bamboo for decoration. This might just be similar, I suppose.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they are sometimes a good ornamental plant. The benefits are they're eaten by pollinators. They're, as I mentioned, resistant to deer and rabbits, moderately drought resistant, and they can help combat soil erosion because they grow very, very quickly, which is also going to come up in the drawbacks section I'm about to do. They are invasive as all get out because of the quick growing. And it describes it as growing in dense, aggressive colonies of plants, almost like tumors or something. And in particular, they tend to go after the native trillium and trout lilies and crowd them out. They cause overgrazing in the other nearby areas that have native species of plants too, because they can't eat that stuff. It's gross. Apparently the bulbs divide repeatedly underground, which I guess you've seen in garlic bulb. It starts with everything kind of wrapped around the stem and then separates out into little, maybe it's something like that,
I've dug up large clumps of bulbs in the garden this year. They were actually Stars of Jerusalem. And wow. They look disgusting, I'd have to say.
Okay, well, you're not their target audience, assuming they have one. Also, like it is pesticide resistant, and if you mow it or try to pull it out of the ground, it just like goes back to the bulb and tries again the next year.
Right.
So, it could be like the tree of heaven, which actually requires fire weeding to get rid of.
And more.
Yeah.
That's also something we're dealing with here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that's all I got about that.
All right.
I just wanted to know what they were.
It was interesting and informative.
Yes.
And I'm sure all of you listening have Stars of Jerusalem within hundreds of feet of you right now. That's how widespread it is in this area in Ohio.
Probably. It seems to be a lot of, it's mistaken for, there's a whole bunch of species in the genus. Some of them are also called Star of Jerusalem or Star of Bethlehem. Or I think there's a totally different Star of Jerusalem that is not even in the same genus or possibly family. And it's, there's this gap between the colloquial name and then the Latin name.
They get around.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Now it's time for Ecological News.
Our first story comes to us from the website commonweal.scot. That's .scot. They had a story put up on May 20th. The title is Another Study Shows the Stupidity of Scottish Nuclear. Apparently, Scotland just came off of another election cycle, and just like in the US and in Australia, a lot of the politicians have been pushing nuclear power, and of course, telling lots of nuclear lies. What they're talking about in this article, though, is that the National Audit Office of Scotland looked at the economics of nuclear power and found that basically there's no economic justification for Scotland to try to build nuclear power plants. And this, of course, follows in the week of the state of Hawaii doing a similar study, coming to a similar conclusion. Pretty much wherever there's a serious study done by people who are actually looking objectively at the issue of energy, it comes down to the idea that nuclear power doesn't make any economic sense. What the National Audit Office focused on this report is the incredible amount of time it takes to pay down the capital costs of building a nuclear power plant versus expanding wind or solar. Even though the public have already begun paying for nuclear power in Scotland, they've already added about £14 per year to everyone's electricity bill. The costs, the upfront costs of building a nuclear power plant are so tremendous that the Scottish people would have to be paying inflated electricity bills all the way up into the 2060s before the plant breaks even. That's assuming that the Sizewell C plant, which is already many years behind schedule and $18 billion over budget, doesn't suffer any more significant delays or price increases. One interesting thing about Sizewell C, it was originally scheduled to cost only $20 billion, but it's already cost about $38 billion. If the price goes up another £8 billion, then the companies that are building it are held completely harmless, legally speaking. The Scottish taxpayers are on the hook for any and all costs above $46 billion. What a fantastic deal for the nuclear power plant construction company. The idea is, if you go too far over budget, you don't lose any money. We'll keep paying you more and more, just as much as it takes. This is on the back, of course, of Scotland already being energy self-sufficient. Wind provides about 70% of Scotland's electricity needs. Next comes hydro production, and then they do have one functioning nuclear power plant. But because of their wind power, Scotland is actually already an electricity exporter. So the need for nuclear simply isn't there. The economics, especially in this case, are truly ruinous. And Scotland has a sad history of being dumped on by the United Kingdom, so let's hope the Scots reject nuclear power in the future. Our next story comes to us from The Guardian. On May 21st, they ran a story titled, "Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is not the climate guy you thought." We only rarely read subtitles, but this time we thought it important. The subtitle is, "While Canada may be clinging to fossil fuels, much of the world is moving on." So, when Mark Carney was trying to replace Trudeau as Prime Minister of Canada, people who care about the climate actually thought they had an ally. Many climate activists worked hard to get him to be Prime Minister. They can be forgiven for their naivete. Carney had been making speeches about the importance of dealing with global warming since 2015. He wrote a book called Values, and quite a bit of that book was dedicated to talking about the climate crisis and how important it would be for Canada to deal with it. He was even the UN Special Envoy for Climate and Finance for several years. So he certainly presented himself as a climate champion in the public eye. However, once he got into office, he immediately started dismantling all of the policies of the Canadian government that dealt with climate change. He scrapped a Canadian initiative called the Consumer Carbon Price. He eliminated regulations that limited the amount of methane pollution that corporations could put into the air. And of course, he did the same with laws that limited or put caps on the emissions by the oil and gas industries. He also has used federal funds to subsidize liquid natural gas pipelines. And he has even pushed the date targeted for Canada to reach net zero emissions from 2035 to 2050. That's literally too late to save the planet by all the science we know. So the environmental organizations in Canada, even the most conservative of them, have come to realize that Carney is actually an enemy in the fight against global warming. He's not as crude or obvious about it as Trump, but many of his policies are the same. Our sympathies go out to our Canadian friends. The story comes to us from the website Common Dreams. It was published on May 21st. The title is, "They Are Called Super Pollutants, and Trump's EPA Wants to Expose You to More of Them." The topic of the article are hydrofluorocarbons, HFCs. They are a group of chemicals that replaced chlorofluorocarbons in air conditioning and refrigeration when the CFCs were found to destroy ozone. HFCs do not destroy ozone, but they have turned out to be incredibly potent greenhouse gases that can stay in the atmosphere for up to 15 years on average. HFC is about 5,000 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than CO2. Some HFCs are as much as 15,000 times as potent as CO2. Although HFCs only make up a small part of the total greenhouse gases people are putting into the air, about 2% right now, the projections were that without regulation, their use would keep accelerating, doubling in just a few years. However, most countries in the world have signed on to something called the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol and have agreed to cut HFC pollution by 80% over the next 30 years. This would be the equivalent of preventing about 70 billion tons of carbon dioxide from getting into the atmosphere. HFCs are entirely man-made chemicals. They do not exist in nature. So the Trump administration has just announced they are pulling out of the Kigali Amendment and will not phase out HFCs after all. They claim that this will somehow lower expenses for average Americans, but industry experts say that it will actually increase prices, mostly because industries that use HFCs have already planned and budgeted to switch over to alternatives, and in many cases those alternatives are actually cheaper. One alternative is a class of chemicals called HFOs, or hydrofluoroolefins. Ammonia can also replace HFCs in many applications. So can CO2 and even hydrocarbons like propane. So this is not going to make a huge difference in global warming pollution in the short term, but it's another example of the Trump administration's attempts to make global warming as bad as possible, as rapidly as possible. This is another cut in the death of 1,000 cuts that the Trump administration is causing for our country. For our last story, we'll go off to India to talk about last week's record-shattering heat wave. We drew on numerous sources for this, but we relied heavily on a YouTube report by India Today Global and an Al Jazeera story published on May 22nd. On May 22nd, the city of Banda in the Uttar Pradesh province was the hottest city on planet Earth, 48.2 degrees Celsius or 119 Fahrenheit. The province had been experiencing temperatures of over 113 degrees for over a week. The problem was that even at night, the temperature stayed above 86 degrees Fahrenheit, so there's no chance to cool down. The heat wave covered most of northern India all the way up to the Himalayas. Delhi was recording temperatures of over 113 degrees. A wet bulb temperature of 35 degrees Celsius, 95 degrees Fahrenheit, is considered deadly. That is, even a young, healthy person with plenty of water would not be able to cool their body with sweating. When the humidity is too high, along with the high temperatures, the sweat on the body can't evaporate. And of course, it's actually that process of evaporation that cools the body. So at wet bulb temperatures above 95 degrees Fahrenheit, people will die in under an hour. The heat wave had a massive impact on India. News reports showed normally crowded streets and plazas empty because no one could go outside. There are fears that food production will collapse because farmers literally can't go into their fields to farm. The authoritarian ruler of India, Modi, is actually a global warming denier. Like many other authoritarians around the world, including Trump, part of his electoral appeal to voters was to deny that global warming even exists. Still, the government has set up cooling stations around Delhi. The problem is that you have to go outside to get to the cooling stations, so most news reports showed them practically empty. It is a certainty that people are dying from the heat there. However, it's impossible to get an accurate count because the government does not keep accurate statistics on this problem. Official numbers as of May 22nd were a laughable 37 people. Some reports have said as many as 100, but a study done in the journal Frontiers in Environmental Health, published May 25th, have suggested that the death count and heat waves of this severity could be as high as 30,000 people after 5 days with temperatures above 113 degrees. The India Today report pointed out that the governments in India are coming to terms with the fact that this could be the new normal. In other words, they're accepting that there will be a growing death toll each and every summer because they don't care about the necessary systemic changes required to save their lives. That's why it's so important for us to keep telling you about what's happening out there in the world. If you are someone who has chosen to act, who has put pressure on these corrupt and uncaring governments to take the death of the environment seriously, we thank you on behalf of us all. And if you're not sure where to start, you can give us a text at 419-973-5841. You can email us at joe@joedemare4agreenfuture.org. And you can check out our social media. You can leave us comments or feedback about the show, get to talk with like-minded people, and perhaps take your first steps towards saving the world. Well, that'll do it for us this week. We might have ended on a lower note with that last story, but whenever you hear about the absolute worst climate news, it might help to know that your neighbors are just as worried as you are. And here at For a Green Future, we're proud to call ourselves your neighbors. This is Joe DeMare signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing